John Summers is the motoring historian. He was a company car thrashing technology sales rep that turned into a fairly inept sports bike rider. Hailing from California, he collects cars and bikes built with plenty of cheap and fast, and not much reliable. On his show, he gets together with various co hosts to talk about new and old cars, driving, motorbikes, motor racing, and motoring travel.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Motoring Historian with me, John Summers. So today, Best of the Bay 2024. What is that, I hear you cry? I mean, I don't, because there's probably only about a dozen of you ever going to listen to this, but, what is that? All three of you clamour. And the answer is that it is sort of, I guess, badge of quality, kind of a trademark, mark of quality, which there's been knocking around the Bay at least for as long as for the 20 or so years that I've lived in the Bay Area. And the notion is that maybe you've moved to the area and you need a plumber. Who's the best plumber? You look on Best of the Bay and it tells you. So I guess there are other products that have come along that arguably have, eaten their lunch somewhat, but that was the original value proposition. And I guess they still do one for cars. And we get involved in that as being the Western automotive journalist. So look, right, I shouldn't talk too long really before I make a point of thanking the people who organise the event. So that is, of course, the Western Automotive Journalist and Michael Coates. Let me name you. Let me name you, Michael, because really I see how much work you did to pull the event together, and it was nice for you to be around to sort of chair and lead and sort of organise the event for us and be the face of it somewhat. So thank you, Michael Coates, and also thank you to the people at Page One Automotive who always supply the press cards for these #WAJ Western Automotive Journalist events that I've done every year annually now, test driving events annually now for must be closer to 10 years than to 5 now. So that's Aaron and Melissa. Thank you for working with the manufacturers and making sure that we have cars to drive and making sure that we have good roads to drive them on. So thank you one and all. And thanks, obviously, also to the car makers, right? Because they show up and give us really nice cars to drive, and at no point do you feel under pressure to say nice things. If you want to, say terrible things, you could. If I wanted to make this a really negative, shocking review, terrible, I could, right? And nobody's positioned it against nobody's, So I was worried as I got involved in journalism that there would be pressure at these kind of events to say nice things, and I don't feel it. And therefore, I have almost exclusively nice things to say about what was a really enjoyable event and what were some really superb cars. And I say that. I mean, regular people who've listened to this before know that if I think something's crap, I'm going to tell you that I think it's crap. I mean, I'm not doing this to get paid, not in some manufacturer's pocket. I just like to communicate in an honest way about cars, vehicles, and motoring. And this Best of the Bay event with the Western Automotive Journalist and Page One and the OEMs that gave us cars, and there were 18 cars, 17 cars, something like that. Thanks to those guys. From the OEMs, a lot of cars came from I think only one from Hyundai, but a couple from Kia and 3 from Genesis, I think. So overall, thank you to Hyundai and your sort of spin-off brands. thanks guys for coming and supporting the event, and thanks for giving us the, the cool hot roddy ones rather than the boring grocery getters that, might have been the way, William Woolard's Top Gear rather than Jeremy Clarkson's Top Gear. I'm pleased that this was Jeremy Clarkson's Top Gear. So thank you for that. So having dispensed with the unusual level of structure for me, let me immediately begin with the full sort of prattle, as my wife would call it. So firstly, right, the location was in Santa Cruz, and it's right on the beach. Like, my room overlooked the boardwalk at Santa Cruz, the beach. There was the pool, then there was the beach, then there was the boardwalk. The waves were crashing loudly. If I'd have, been somebody who needed silence to sleep, it would not have been possible, because even when I had the windows and the door closed, you could still hear the waves of the Pacific crashing. So, even though where I live in San Francisco, we are lucky enough to have a bit of an ocean view out of the back of the house there, especially since the neighbours just cut the tree down, giving us a much better view. Thank you, neighbours. Yeah, but, this was better than that, so that was really cool. And whilst I'm mentioning, being vaguely serious and actually influencery, which I'm not normally, but look, right, in case anybody listens and is staying in Santa Cruz, the Dream Inn, that was the name of the place, and it was cool. It's 3 stars, and you're probably looking on hotels.com being that much money for 3 stars. Yeah, just do it, because it's right in the heart of Santa Cruz, and they've got decent car parking, and the rooms are clean and nice and not pretentious. It's just a decent place to stay, and in keeping with the coolness of Santa Cruz, which I'd been to once before many years ago, but it was a date with my wife and it really didn't go well, and that's a story for another time, because I guess I associate Santa Cruz with almost crashing the car on a really important relationship, on a relationship that I perceived as important at the time. And luckily I was able to get the car out of the ditch, but that's why I've never really been back to Santa Cruz. But anyway, I enjoyed this visit to Santa Cruz. I guess the other thing that I should say is that you can get down there by driving on 280 and then 17. 17's a winding highway. 17's pretty cool if you're if you like alpine roads, it's a dual carriageway, but if you like alpine twisty dual carriageway, it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's usually clogged, and even when it's not clogged, there's like California, like left lane, like I'm doing the speed limit, I won't move side people. So there's also cops always over the crest. So, 17, not that much fun. But I realized PCH all the way down on Highway 1 on the Pacific Coast Highway, all the way down, I realized that I could do that. And I thought, in the past, I think it's pretty good, that stretch of road. Well, I'd forgotten how bloody good it is. I mean, it's too trafficy between San Francisco and Half Moon Bay. But once you get past Half Moon Bay, all the BS just goes away, and it turns into a really good, like, British A road, French N road, but with the most awesome scenery you have ever seen, because you've usually got views of the ocean. And I know when my parents drove PCH up from LA, they said that they thought that the best bit was the bit as you come up towards San Francisco. Now, I have to say, I do like it down by Santa Barbara, but, that has the same issues the bit up by San Francisco has, is lots of traffic. This bit down towards Santa Cruz, it was quietish even in the middle of the day, and really nice. I drove down in the truck, so, I just had the cruise set and was just rolling. It wasn't like I was doing anything crazy. And, really enjoyed the drive down there, and those roads are absolutely awesome, which is, of course, why it was picked for the event. So look, before I talk about the test route there, just let me have a look at my checklist here and make sure I haven't, missed any of the bits and pieces that I should have covered, right? because it's the best of the bay thing, all of us had to drive each car and all of us had to commit to be there, therefore, throughout the time and stick to a precise timetable. In other words, literally, it was like 9:30, so I must be in the Lexus. But by 10, you had to be back because then you were out in the Ioniq 5N. And, you had to be back, right? And the reality is that although, if you think of it, you've got like lots of cars back to back, you're bound to be leaping out and taking a pee, and you're bound to, whilst you're learning the route, maybe take 35 minutes instead of 30 or something like that. And that compounds. But there were, to be honest, it worked out really smoothly. And any time, somebody else was out in a car that, you were meant to be driving at that particular time, you weren't like, damn it, where are you? It didn't feel like that at all. That was an opportunity to, take a pee and eat an energy bar and feel like you could, it was quite a nice little respite. And then at the end, we voted, right? And there were various different categories, and I'll post links to those. But let's talk about this. So, how do you compare cars of all different price points, and how do you name the best of the bay when you've only driven 17, 18 cars? The answer to that is, well, of course, if you've only driven 17 or 18 cars, it's not going to be the best of all the bay. It's going to be the best of the people who showed up for the event, right? But that doesn't mean to say that if we're going to recommend one car over another, that doesn't mean that in the eyes of a punter, a customer, that might be worthwhile looking at the one that we recommended over the one that we didn't recommend. So you must drive each. You've got 30 minutes with each car and a designated route to drive. I'm going to talk a bit about the designated routes. There were two. One took us out of the hotel along like a 30-mile-an-hour like bus lane, like just obviously pit lane speed limit section fundamentally. And then there was a stoplight, and if you went straight over the stoplight, it sort of wound you up a little hill. And I guess when they were planning it, it's a dual, so it would have worked quite well. But there was a rock slide, and there were people or mudslide, and there was trucks working in the road, and 25-mile-an-hour limit that seemed to be very badly placed. And I saw there was a college up at the top of the hill, and there was a cop issuing tickets there. So although I use that route sometimes just for a bit of variety, most of the time I use the coastal route that they'd laid out. And that ran west from Santa Cruz, but like stop signs and like strip mall and all of that. And then that slackens off actually surprisingly quickly, disappears. And then you're like out in the sticks. So in other words, if there's Mimsas, you can pass them easily. The traffic's thinned out. Any of the meaningful traffic that's actually trying to get anywhere, it's going to be leaving on Highway 17 and leaving that way out of Santa Cruz. It's not leaving on Highway 1. There's just like local traffic on Highway 1. So hence the fact that the traffic clears quite quickly, and you would think half an hour wasn't enough to explore the performance of cars with 400, 500 horsepower. It was. I'm not saying like, I tested every vehicle's top speed and 0 to 60 and, I G-meter on that. No, right? No, of course not. But what I mean is there was enough road for you to really get a seat of the pants feel for the cars. So at the end, when you were asked to compare them together and say which the best was, you felt like you had enough information to be able to do that. Just to talk about that process a little bit. So we drove the cars, and then at the end of the day, we did an online ballot, which most of us did, that day before we left. We were able to post comments, qualifying comments as well. But I think a really important thing to note is something that Michael Coates said a couple of times, which is that we're all capable of judging these cars as being the best at what they set out to do. That's what we're judging them as being. Is this the best at what it set out to do? yeah, very bluntly, a lot of the cars we drove were really expensive, and that weighed heavily on my, on my decision making. Why don't I cut straight to the chase? There doesn't need to be any tension around the my opinion around the awards. I felt all around the best car was the Camry that we drove, Toyota Camry, 2025 Camry. I know, right? Shocking. First he buys a Toyota, then he thinks one's the best car. But really, it's just most of the people most of the time. And it does such a, it doesn't do a 3-star job. It really does a 4 or a 4.5-star job at all of the things. So I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but that was a bloody good car, and because of the price point, I liked it, right, an awful lot. Now, if you took that out and you said, they also had us do best SUV and best technology and that kind of stuff, and that gave you a chance to talk about other things. But the best all-round vehicle there was we had an entry-level Lucid to look at. A couple of years ago, I drove the 1100 horsepower one. It's my first pod, fittingly, right? Because I said it was an awesome, groundbreaking car, and since then they've steadily decontented, and they brought us a pretty decontented car, and I was really keen to try it. And what I found was something that did not feel that decontented. It didn't feel like knock your socks off like the 1100 horsepower one had, not in a luxury way, right? The materials in that car was so nice. It had a moonroof. This car didn't have that, but it also had a 70 grand price point, which, 80 grand with the trim, that one that we had, but that kind of price point, like a semi-normal price point, right? A lot less than the Hellcat Durango that we drove that was bloody 113, like 115, I think. Anyway, like way, for given, those parameters, the Lucid was clearly the most superior, the thing that fitted the definition of best car best, for me at least, and I think for a lot of the others as well. One of the questions they asked was, if it was your money, what would you do? And there's a Genesis sedan, a G80 sedan. It was a 3.5 all-wheel drive turbo. It was everything I love about my E55, but more and new and not going to break, and golf club presence, and just more performance than my Mercedes. Let's be real, and I'm not going to put a number on it, but at the kind of speeds where you can measure a difference between a 20-year-old sedan and a brand new one, this was a mighty, really a mighty product. I was very, very impressed with the Genesis G80, so that's what I'd bought with my money. But look, right, whilst we're doing a highlights, we drove this Fiat 500, right, which was easily the cheapest EV there. It was in no way inadequate. It did the job just fine, right? I personally don't like the driving position on Fiat 500s. I always feel like you're sitting on the car. I always want to make the seat lower. Didn't buy one of the Abarth ones for exactly that reason. And this had that feeling, even though it's like one of the new shape ones and all. But, big trunk and nice inside, basic. But, you could buy bloody 3 of them in comparison to a lot of the other cars there. So, what's not to like? That was really my thought. What is not to like? And that really is the takeaway. There were a lot of really good cars here, some absolutely brilliant ones, many with absolutely breathtaking features, and really nothing that I was like, this is terrible. There was stuff that I wouldn't have wanted or didn't care for particularly, and just the sheer eye-watering price of new cars at the moment. I'm sat in the garage here, as I always do when I record these pods, and I'm looking at 91 GSX-R 1000 that I rode earlier today, and we just went around the block, you know, didn't get into third gear, certainly didn't get, you know, anywhere above 50 or 60 miles an hour maybe. It broke down, you know, stalls on me when you have the throttle open for a little bit. When you close it again, doesn't want to run. Can't bump start it at the side of the road. Trying to start it, won't go. That experience, both the heavy clutch and your hand hurting trying to hold the throttle open slightly because it's got these Mikuni flat slide carbs on it, so the throttle really takes some twisting. So like balancing the clutch when you're like at idle speed, oh my word, it's painful. It's like an instrument of torture until all of a sudden it's the most amazing piece of poetry ever. It's like when you get whiskey, you know, or I've found in the cupboard some tequila that my wife bought for me ages ago, like ages and ages ago. And I was like, oh, I'll try this. Why not? It's amazing. Like, I don't know what I was missing out on. Like, I don't know what I've been doing with it for the past decade. I just forgot it was there. It's incredible. So what am I trying to say here? Let me bring this first part to a conclusion by saying that whilst many of these cars were good, great, fast, they ticked every single box you could want them to tick if you were a spreadsheet box ticking kind of person. None of them fulfilled my soul in the same way as the Gixxer did. None of them. And that's the tequila parallel, right? That you can't rationalize why tequila's awesome, really good tequila like this one's awesome. I mean, you can try, but you just sound a bit silly. The point is that these are things that you feel in your gut. And great as a Camry is, you don't feel it in your gut the same way as you do a Gixxer. Great as a Lucid Air is, you don't feel it in your gut the same way as you do a Ducati or a Harley Davidson. It's just how it is. As the machines get more efficient, they just get less interesting. An Arga is much more interesting than a brand new Hyundai microwave, but we all know which is going to heat your cup of coffee more efficiently and quick. Thank you, Drive-Thru.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.